NTI, at least with some of our districts, and part of it, quite frankly, and I'm of course biased as a Kentuckian, due to the talent in Kentucky in our teaching force and in our leadership. And I'm not talking about KDE, I'm talking about you and what you do and your colleagues do around the state in our schools. And so I thought we were, and the governor agreed that we were well positioned. And then when you factor that in with technology, and we excel on the technology platforms compared to other states, again, not perfect, but when you factor all that together, we were very well positioned in Kentucky to ensure that every school district achieved 1,062 equivalent hours. And so that's what we're going to do. Some of you, I believe a school will hit 1,062 on or around April 24th. That's very early, but that was due to how their calendar was laid out. I think most districts will probably hit 1,062 in mid-May. And then there are some districts that will hit it, and Jefferson was going to hit it around June 3rd, which leads me to the next decision that we made, was that we decided to allow all school districts to count all NTI days as 7-hour days. And that doesn't mean you have to add an additional hours worth of activities for your kids if you were doing a 6-hour equivalent. That's simply a bookkeeping effort, and we wanted to shave a few days off of calendars and to recognize the fatigue issue. And we also wanted all schools to be able to finish within the month of May. And so that's what that's going to do. Jefferson, I just use Jefferson as an example. They were going to finish around June 3rd, hitting 1,062 with being able to count 7 hours. Jefferson will finish the last week of May. I think Fayette County's in a similar situation. So I believe we've arrived at a good compromise and a good place. I know that's easy for me to say sitting here, but because you all are out there doing all this work, but I wanted you to know the thought process. Those decisions were not taken lightly. We used a lot of feedback and honored the feedback received in previous meetings. Also from your representative groups, I had conversations with KEA. And of course, all the other K groups. So I wanted you to know that we understand the effort, the heavy lift that this is, but I also wanted you to understand how much it is appreciated. And then that comes from the governor and the lieutenant governor as well. They've made several comments to me about how they couldn't be more proud of what's going on in our schools. And I feel the same way. So I want to thank you for that, and I look forward to the discussion today. And I'm also happy to take questions if you have them as we proceed through the meeting.
All right, thank you so much. At this time, we will have roll call, and when I say your name, if you would just unmute your microphone, and if you would just say the school and district that you are representing this morning. So we'll start with Josh Blevins, if you're here. Is Josh here? All right, how about Lester Diaz?
Lester Diaz, Frederick Douglass High School, Fayette County Public Schools, Kentucky.
Thank you. Melanie Irwin.
Melanie Irwin, Bath County High School.
Thank you. Welcome. Michael Goodnow.
Michael Goodnow, Erlanger Ellesmere Schools.
Thanks. Tamala Howard. All right. Jennifer Hutchison.
Jennifer Hutchison, Pickenham Elementary, Lexington.
Brian Jacobs.
Present. Brian Jacobs, Lafayette High School, Fayette County Public Schools.
Thank you. Michael Kelly. How about Robert King? Linville Martin. Martin Munson. Oh, Martin had let me know he couldn't be here today. Darla Payne.
Darla Payne, Ackerman Middle School, Boone County School District.
Lisa Purdue,
Lisa Purdue, Cumberland County Elementary School, Cumberland County School District.
Kim Rice,
Kim Rice, the Academy at Shawnee, Jefferson County Public Schools.
thank you. Michelle Ritchie,
Michelle Ritchie, Perry County Central High School, Perry District.
and Toya Roby,
Toya Roby, Kentucky School for the Deaf.
and Shervita, West Jordan. Okay, and did anyone join maybe before and was not able to enter in and do roll call? If you did, go ahead and unmute now. Okay, I do want to let you know that this meeting is being recorded. It is a public meeting. So it will be on the KDE portal for viewing after today's meeting ends. Okay, we're ready to move on. Paul, if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide. Thank you. So if you would, just as we typically do, sometime this afternoon while you're either on or right after you get on, if you wouldn't mind to use our typical process for checking in and go ahead and digitally check in to the meeting on our website. The website is in the chat, and it was also in the meeting invitation for this afternoon. But if you would do that, then that helps us to double check to make sure that we have everyone accounted for who's here. Okay, next slide, please. So at this time, we will need to ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve today's agenda.
Okay, and that was
Kim Rice.
and a second by
Diaz.
Lester Diaz. And for what we're going to do for consensus purposes is if you agree to this, then if you would just stay silent. But if you have something that you see that's missing or incorrect or something that you want to add or change, then please go ahead and speak up at this time. All right, so I'll take that as a consensus, and you could also type in the chat box if there were any anything that you didn't agree with or for today's agenda. All right, let's move on. So if you would please, if you haven't already, take a moment to review the minutes from our last quarter meeting. And again, those exist on, they're in the link to today as well as on the website. And then once you've had a chance to review those, I know that I sent them to you prior also, so hopefully you've had a chance maybe to look over them. We'll just need someone to make a motion and then a second, and then we'll need consensus again to accept those minutes.
Lisa Purdue, I make a motion to accept.
Thank you, Lisa. Is there a second?
This is Robert King. I second.
Thank you. And then all in favor, if you will remain silent, and others who see something that needs to be added or changed, if you would either type in the chat box or unmute your mic and let us know. We'll wait just a moment. Okay, then we'll take that as consensus for the minutes being approved. All right, let's move to the next slide, please. And at this time, I will introduce David Cook, the Division Director, and he will talk about and give you some information around non-traditional instruction. Notice the guiding question: what are the lessons learned from the emergency NTI closure that can inform our approaches to teaching and learning moving forward? So David Cook, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Jenny. Thanks everyone for allowing me a little time here. I'll go as quickly as I can because we know we have a very packed agenda. First of all, as the commissioner pointed out, I wanted to reiterate how much I myself and my team appreciate all the hard work your teachers, your staffs, your bus drivers, your food service workers, everybody has done in making this challenging experience better for every kid in the state. We have a lot of things to be thankful for in Kentucky, and one of them is the fact that all of you all have stepped up to educate, feed, and support your kids and your teachers during this time. And we'll talk a little bit more about specifically some areas that we can talk about with NTI that I think I want to get your feedback on. So if you go to the next slide. Just some fast facts about the situation that we find ourselves in. Normally in a particular school year, if you can think about the fact that we had 83 school districts in NTI this school year prior to the emergency, and those school districts got a total of 10 days to use for NTI. The maximum NTI days we have in a school year then becomes about 830. And we don't ever use that many because districts don't use all their days. But since we started March the 16th, we have used, as of last Friday, 3,429 NTI days. The way we talk about that is we look at NTI, as the commissioner just pointed out, as a learning loss reduction. We know that it's not the same as an instructional day in your classrooms, but we believe that it is providing an opportunity where kids won't fall as far behind as they would have, as other states have done, just completely closing school. So we have 3,400 plus already, and every week that we do NTI during the closure, we will have an additional 860 days of instruction of learning loss reduction. As the commissioner pointed out, we're very excited that our student participation rate for NTI is at 93%, which matches the NTI participation rate prior to the emergency. So all the districts who did NTI, if you were one of those before we had closure for the emergency, that rate is equivalent to what we see on other regular NTI days. And then the last fact that I will tell you is that it's pretty obvious across the board that districts who are doing a blended approach to NTI, and by that I mean obviously that they have digital opportunities, but they also have paper opportunities, are finding the most success. That's not obviously universally, but it's pretty close. It's best when you have all the pieces together so that you can reach as many kids as possible, and you don't just rely on digital learning, although that's a huge part of it. Next slide, please. We started talking in my division with my team, and I think KDE is starting to sort of feel into this phrase too. I heard people for a long time, I want to get back to normal. Well, I don't know that normal is where we'll ever go back to, and I don't want to call it a new normal because we don't want to throw everything out that we've been doing so well for so long. So we're calling it a different normal. It's not going to be the same, but a lot of it will be the same, but there's going to be some differences because of the situation that we find ourselves in now. And so the opportunities are there as well as looking at the challenges. So that's what I want to do for just the next couple of minutes, is share with you what we're discovering as my team does a lot of looking around the state and talking to people every day, the opportunities that we see that could come out of this tragedy, this COVID crisis. There are obviously opportunities for education because of non-traditional instruction. So next slide, please. So here are the areas of opportunity, and then the next slide will be areas or lessons challenges that we need to address. So obviously nobody was prepared who wasn't an already existing NTI district for NTI on March the 16th. But every day that we do NTI from March the 16th until now, we're better at it today than we were on March the 16th. And we'll be better at it when we close school officially with NTI days than we are today. So that's the first thing, is we're better prepared for school closure than we would be in the past. We're finding that obviously there are huge gaps in many places across the state around teachers comfort level or even knowledge of remote learning and digital learning. And it provides us with a great opportunity moving forward to give a lot of remote learning, professional development, professional learning opportunities to teachers. We hope that what is happening with teachers that are learning how to use new creative approaches to their instruction and use digital tools and use all those things is that they won't, when you stretch yourself, you won't go back to the size you were before or the way that you were before. And we hope that that's true here, that teachers will incorporate some of the things they've been using during this time as they improve their instructional practices moving forward. And of course, because of the way NTI works, there's a lot more opportunity for improvement of formative and summative assessment through authentic assessment. In other words, finding out by talking to a kid that they've mastered something is just as effective as an assessment tool as having them take an assessment, a quiz, a test, or so forth. Next slide. Thank you. Here's the concern areas, which is the ones I'm sure if I stopped and you all could fill this list out and make it a couple of pages longer probably, but here's the big ones. Juggling roles, everybody juggling roles, principals, teachers, parents, students, everybody's having to figure out how this all works in the context of their lives, which are disrupted as well. The lack of preparation for NTI, the fact that we had to jump into it so quickly for many districts, over half of the districts. Of course, one of the big things we're finding out from an equity standpoint is the connectivity and access that students have to the internet and to a device. The connection for students, to students, and this is not about their access, this is about how teachers and students are able to connect. And what we've discovered, in the same way that kids don't have internet access, there may be situations because of their home life or their lack of a home or their transiency or anything else like that, they may be hard to connect to help with their work. The curriculum coverage, what are the gaps going to look like this fall? Those are obviously other concerns that we have. And the fact that on one hand, the state assessment not being there in our estimation has provided for a lot more flexibility and creativity in how teachers are teaching because they weren't focused on that test, but also that means that the test is not there and we don't have a way of identifying areas where we have concern with kids who aren't performing where they should be. So that state assessment could probably go on both sides of the coin. But so those are the areas of concern and opportunity that my staff has been looking into quite a bit. That's what has bubbled up to the top, of course. So I'm just going to stop there, and I'd love to hear your comments on that or additional things that you think are areas that we need to be thinking about as we build out what's going to happen when we get into the summer and the fall.
All right, so if you have any comments for David, you can go ahead and unmute now. And if not, or if you don't have any right at this moment, then we'll go ahead and move on. Paul, if you wouldn't mind advancing the next slide to Dr. Amanda Ellis, and she will talk to you about graduation requirements. And the guiding question is, are we adequately communicating the options for graduation requirements? So Amanda, I will turn it over to you. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to hear voices and see faces, and I hope that you're doing well and taking good care of yourself and your staff. I've been in your shoes, not in this situation, but it's hard enough to be a principal in April, much less when everybody's at home and you keep getting news and new challenges every day. So I did want to give a brief update on graduation requirements. This had been a topic a couple of weeks ago because folks were realizing that it was going to probably go through May, and folks were making decisions on grading, and especially our graduates, our 2020 graduates, and the impact it's had on their year. And so those of you who are at the high school level currently or have been, clearly many of you do senior checks. You have one-on-one meetings with your seniors to ensure that they're on track, and those who are not, you're working on interventions and ways to help them meet the criteria. So what we did, and thank you, Paul, actually you can move on to the next slide. We threw out two options. We actually started with students, and most of the students in our student advisory group are seniors, not all of them, but a good number of them are. And so we threw out some ideas about grad requirements. And so just as a reminder, or if you are not aware, we have a regulation and it is the minimum high school graduation requirements, and the minimum are 22 credits. I would venture to say every single district has more or exceeds the minimum. I can't tell you I've looked at every single district, but the majority, any I've ever looked at, add on additional credits, or they add additional requirements such as being transition ready or having a credential, meeting benchmark, doing community service, whatever it may be. Districts have the ability to have local policy as long as it meets or exceeds the minimum requirements. And so just to remind you what those are, the 22 credits are 4 credits in English language arts, which is English 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 credits in mathematics, which is algebra 1, geometry, and algebra 2, with 1 elective math credit that must be taken, 3 science credits, 3 social studies credits at the discretion of the district as long as the standards are covered, a half a credit in health, a half a credit in physical education, 1 credit in visual performing arts, and then the 7 elective credits. And those are the minimum requirements that we already have regulation for, especially for the 2020 graduates. Clearly, any of the changes that we made to graduation requirements does not impact the seniors for this year. And so we posed to the districts to consider what they currently require at the local level in your district of what graduation requirements are. So for example, some districts have 27 or 28 credit requirements. Some require, like we mentioned before, transition readiness, a complete ILP, lots of things that are in addition to the minimum. So we threw out option 1, which is if a district felt it was necessary, could waive their local policy, depending on the discretion of the board if they chose to do so, and require the minimum 22 credits. Or the option 2 that we shared, and Paul, if you'll share that slide, please. The option 2 would still be all of the core courses. What it would do would eliminate the requirement of the electives. Now, most students have far exceeded the requirements of your district or of your SBDM if you have additional requirements on that, depending on how your district is run. But in some cases, there were some students who who are seniors, may have not had access to technology or access to support that was needed, connectivity, whatever it would be, to have access to complete those credits. And so what we did after discussing with the Kentucky Board of Education, asked that any district who wanted to have the regulation waived to only require the minimum 15 credit hours could do so. When we took feedback from, we had a group of principals, KASA surveyed, some of you may or may not have been a part of that sample, student advisory task force, we threw it by several people, it was kind of 50-50, but the resounding feedback was, please leave it at the local level. Don't lower the bar for our kids that we've worked so hard to get where they are. We don't really have this issue, or we're already meeting with our seniors. So the resounding feedback, like I said, we received is please let us decide, but we appreciate the flexibility. And then the other piece, just to bring to your attention, that was new this year for the excuse me, for the 2020 graduates was completing or passing with a 60% pass rate the civics exam. Now that was a statutory requirement. So thanks to our Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman, who's also the Secretary of Education and Workforce, and Commissioner Brown, they were very responsive to that and signed a waiver to waive that statute for the 2020 graduates only. So many of our students had already taken it through the digital driver's license platform. Many of them took it by paper pencil, but there was a good number of students who did not have access to technology or connectivity to take it online, and it would have violated what the governor had promoted and public health, the local public health departments, and Dr. Stack and his team of having social distancing and not bringing students into a building to take an exam. So we wanted to honor that, support that, keep everyone safe ultimately. And so thankfully for the help of our leadership, that statute was waived for this year. And so I just want to give you all an update about that. I'm sure you've heard about it, but we did start with students. It is ultimately up to the district of how they choose to go about it. At this point, we've only had one district request a waiver for the 15 credits that just came in today, but most other districts are considering the 22 credits or maintaining what they have. And so we have communicated that quite broadly through as many facets as possible. We do have a guidance document out for districts that we released. I think it was last week. Honestly, my weeks are running together, so I apologize if I'm wrong on that date. And what we issued was basically guidance on considerations as districts are making decisions. So we just put in there different topics and things to consider as districts were contemplating waiving any of their local policies and the unintended consequences or impact it would have on students. And we also really pushed the thinking around equitable access and the decisions that were being made for students to ensure that students weren't being penalized, not because they didn't participate or do what they needed to, just simply because they did not have equitable access to what they needed to complete the requirements. And so the guiding question we shared was, are we adequately communicating the options for graduation requirements? I would love to have you input any of your feedback on the chat if you'd like, or if you want to share, I'm happy to take feedback on that as well. And we welcome that. I did have a question from Darla. And I'll just share it. You can actually see it in the chat, but it says, off topic a little, as a middle school principal, our 8th graders were told they were proficient on this year's K-Prep. If they were proficient on this year's K-Prep, they would have met the future sophomore requirements. Are there alternatives on the radar yet? Not at this time, because as you know, accountability was put on hold. We had the waiver from US Ed because we would not be able to assess students this year, but that's a great point that was made. There was also legislation that was approved that would be possibly altering graduation requirements again from SB 158. So we are actually walking through that as well to understand what the impact that would be on graduation requirement changes that just passed a year ago. So Darla, thank you for that question. We will follow up as we learn more, and it's a great question. I have recorded that for my conversations with OAA, so thank you very much. And I will caveat just briefly into graduation ceremonies. As I think Kevin mentioned earlier in his opening comments about the governor giving feedback around graduation ceremonies. This is a very hot topic. If you're at the high school level or even elementary or middle and you have awards programs or any type of graduations, I know your email is probably heavily used right now with just getting feedback from families who are really hurting for their kids. I know you all are, but we are really working very closely with the governor's office to provide some options. I will tell you that it's ultimately a local decision, and we will absolutely support what is in the best interest of the health of all of our community members and what public health would recommend. As the governor had said to the superintendents, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, is that basically it would depend on what phase we're in, but really likely in July, if we're even in phase 2, it would only be 50 people who could be together, and you would still have to socially distance. You would still have to have your protection. And so he was just really encouraging leaders to think about, district leaders to think about ways to virtually or do the drive up or other alternatives to graduation. We know this is really, really tough. It's not what folks wanted to hear, but that's the reality of where we are right now. Kevin, I don't know if you wanted to input any other information on graduation specific. And I don't know if Kevin's still on. I know he is crazy busy.
I was saying, sure. I think
short it, I would just say there's something going around about an option that a school in Mississippi is proposing to use, and we're asking the governor's office in public health for feedback on that. The option is, you've probably heard it about having a set time where a student would come to the auditorium or the gymnasium with just immediate family. There would be a photographer. The student walks across the stage, gets the diploma at 6 feet distance. It's videoed, and then there's nobody else in the room but family, student, administrator, photographer, and then the next student rotates through 5 minutes later. And then the district in Mississippi is planning on editing all of those videos together into basically a video of a ceremony with everybody walking across the stage. So that's a very complicated thing to pull off. And so we want to get feedback from public health, and then to the extent you're considering that option, just know that logistically you would have to have, you all know your family's best and whether families will abide by rules or not. And, I mentioned just kind of joking today, my family, would probably show up with bullhorns and air horns, and I know you have those problems too. So I'm not trying to make light of it, but we just need to be aware you don't want to have something that then gets away from you on location. So but we also want to be as creative as possible to honor the students. So we're going to get guidance on that. But right now, the two options that are definitely endorsed by the governor, and when I say the governor, that's the governor talking with the public health experts about what is necessary. So the two options the governor mentioned would be just a strict virtual ceremony, of course, strictly online. And then the second option, districts can follow the model that churches are using for, they've been called drive-in, drive-up, or drive-through services, but you have to follow those protocols exactly, meaning you'd have to enforce making sure no family got out of their car. There can only be one family per car. The cars would have to be spaced 6 feet apart, and you can't pass things between vehicles. Those are the same guidelines that churches have to abide by. So we're going to be putting that in writing for you at the department as guidance document to principals and superintendents. I know that's kind of down into the weeds, but I also know it's an important part of the school year and something you're getting questions about already. So just be cautious, and we're happy to field ideas and help you work through new or maybe more innovative approaches. And then anything you do, make sure you're involving your local health officials. Even if you were to do a drive-in service and you were going to abide by, and you obviously needed to abide by all those things I read off, you need to have your public health department involved in those discussions, because there may be things that they need you to do, or they may need to be on site because they have all kinds of legal authority in a time of public emergency.
Thank you, Kevin. So it's not easy, but we are certainly open for ideas. And if anything, those of you who've seen the Mississippi example that was floating around Twitter, it's a great idea. But as Kevin said, it's very complicated, and the devil is in the details of really keeping everyone safe. But I do think it's a good start to thinking creatively about how to make it special for the kids, yet maintaining the safety of everyone, so we can get through this for sure. Is there any other topics or questions? Please feel free, I guess, since we are on a kind of tight timeline, to put it in the chat box. I'll be happy to address it. And again, thank you, Darla, for the question. I think it's it's a great question. Nobody's asked yet. And so I really appreciate it. So Jenny, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Sure. And actually, we will dovetail right into the next section. And so Kelly Foster will join Amanda, and we'll address any end of year questions and concerns that you have. So what pressing issues or concerns do you have as you're preparing for the close of the school year?
Okay, well, I'll jump in, and then Kelly, I want you to add too. So the other question we've been getting that kind of dovetails beautifully actually into graduation ceremonies is, like I said earlier, and Kelly's been in this role too, just like your host as well. you know, how do you close out a school year? So there were three major things that were brought up in the conversation with our task force this week. And there are three buckets, and I'd love to hear from you all if you feel like these are the same buckets. Number one is, how do we continue this until we finish out the school year? So how do we end strong? And there are a lot of things to end. And so I have a survey piece that you can kind of order, and we'll walk through that in a moment. How do we approach summer and support our families and students in the summer, since they really have not had face-to-face or direct support since March, and you've been doing the very best you can do? And then how do we re-enter, hopefully, if all goes well, to re-enter in the fall? Those are kind of the three buckets. Kelly, I'm going to turn it to you, and then I will post a survey in the chat box for you all to respond to, and we can definitely have a dialogue about this too. Kelly?
Great. So like Amanda said, those were three big ideas that popped up during our task force. And then we've also started to see on social media the last few days, and just from reaching out and talking with you all, simple things that used to be so simple. How are you going to do those now? How are you going to collect Chromebooks at the end of the year? How are you going to collect athletic uniforms? How are library books going to be turned back in? So I'm starting to see different things from different districts on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And so we want to hear, Amanda and I have been keeping a list of those questions, and our end goal is to be able to turn around some guidance to get out to all of you all pretty quickly. And of course, that's also working with public health as far as what they would approve to get some of those items back into your buildings. But when you look at our guiding question, what pressing issues or concerns do you have as you prepare for the closeout of the school year? We really want to hear from you, either through the microphone or through chat. What are other items? It's been a few years since I've been a building principal. So what are some items that we're not thinking about that we typically do in closing out the school year that you all need assistance on, guidance on, especially with the health risks that are out there? So we locker clean out, I see that just pop up. So I will share, I was on the phone with the superintendent before this Teams meeting, and he was going through all the different options. And, you know, one of the things that crossed his mind is, just like they're delivering food, they would clean out lockers in garbage bags and have those dropped off when they, you know, did their food delivery. So things like that, that's what we need to hear from you, so we can work with the folks in public health and be able to turn around some quick guidance to you all as you end your school years over the next month. So we'll be glad to take any questions. And like I said, we'd love to hear your feedback.
Absolutely. And as you're thinking about it, because I know that I feel like we've caught everybody kind of in shock mode this week with just the reality of figuring out the end of school and wrapping your head around it, how to take care of all your constituents, your students, your staff, and your families. And that's a lot. And so if you also look in the chat box, there is a link. If you click on it, it will take you to a survey. And just as Kelly has mentioned, we just the few items we brainstormed the other day of just each part of the transition into the end of the school year, the summer, and how to re-enter. If you all even would respond to that survey, that would be fantastic. I know you'll have to work with your districts to really coordinate a lot of this stuff, but we want to give you guidance and considerations to really make sound decisions. I know you are making decisions even faster sometimes than you would on a daily basis, and at a much larger scale, since it impacts everybody plus everybody's home. And that's a big deal. And we definitely are aware that we know that you also have a lot of concerns around just the well-being of your staff and how they close out. So we are definitely open for conversation or feedback. At least if you'll take the survey, that's helpful for us. That'll kind of prioritize your concerns or give us solutions for better ideas, because we certainly don't want to give you something that's not helpful. So I'll quit talking. I apologize, and then we'll take your feedback.
And Amanda, I'd like to add one thing too. Amanda mentioned about summer programs and possible remediation and intervention, and obviously we don't know what that's going to look like yet. until we see where we are in the world of health, safe health. But just so you know, we are communicating with your superintendents regularly, and you may have seen information in the news, and also they may be sharing information with you about the CARES Act. And so that is a federal relief act. And so local districts are going to have access to federal funds that will help them through this crisis. So once it is safe to come back together, there are going to be dollars out there that your school district will have for intervention programs, either before school starts or maybe something that you would do after school. So I also would like to hear from you all, either in the chat or you can email one of us directly. But what do you see as the biggest needs in remediation and intervention, and what ideas do you have around those? Because when we are able to come back together in groups, we will definitely want to provide some guidance on what that needs to look like. But I just wanted you all to be aware that funding is out there, because sometimes when we share that with superintendents, it may not be getting down to everyone in the district. So that money is out there, and I just wanted you to be aware about it. Thank you.
We did have a couple of comments, Kelly, one of them, and from Jennifer. So we had Darla's, the locker clean out, absolutely. The other is staff mental emotional health. This is a significant concern, and I could not agree more. This is not just impacting students and their families, but definitely your staff. As Kevin mentioned before, I think that's a huge piece, and that's actually listed in the survey. I'd love to get your feedback on your priority around that and support that you would need. And then the other one Kim Rice had shared is a possible additional spike of this virus, as well as the flu, which is projected to be really bad this winter. Are we thinking ahead to how attendance may be impacted again if this does occur? And that's one of the questions, is if this were to happen, what have we learned? What have been our lessons learned to be able to react quickly and efficiently, almost to David's point of what would we continue? What would we do differently? And it's not just back to normal, but I think that's absolutely an excellent point. And then there's also, she said, I am also concerned that parents will begin to believe that sending their child to school physically is no longer necessary, since we've been able to technically have instruction in a virtual setting. And I think that's that reentry piece that we're really going to have to think about academically and socially and emotionally, how to re-engage in a school setting. And I think, to your point, I think that's a real concern. Even the safety of their children, I think is a piece too. Great points brought up.
Yeah, I agree. And I would just add to that all of this is happening right now in real time and extremely fast for all of you all, because you all are dealing with the daily issues of feeding your kids, doing the NTI work, and now you're thinking about all these things at the end of the school year. So just to try to reassure you all, we are thinking long-term at the department. We are partnering with national organizations, CCSSO and SREB, and talking to other states about how are you all going to open up the next school year if we were able to do so, different types of blended learning. The social emotional piece is huge, not just for our students and our teachers, but also our parents. And so we love that type of feedback, because we want to make sure we're not forgetting anything, because we're not right there in the firing range with you all. So, as you all think of something, like I said, please reach out to us via email after this Teams meeting today, because we want to try to be able to provide you with the best guidance we can as we move forward through this.
Agree completely. We had another one, Jennifer shared. It says our last day isn't until May 27th. I'm concerned that students and families will stop participating when the districts around us begin to close out mid-May. And so to that point, Kevin has announced, I don't remember if he said it today, we've been on lots of advisories lately, is that there are 2 webcasts that are going to take place next week that are going to be promoted, and I hope that you will help us promote it as well. On Wednesday, there will be Wednesday, April 28th at noon. So we're hoping to hit teachers at that lunchtime area from 12 to 1:30 is we're going to actually have teachers who have lessons learned from different levels, elementary, middle, and high, different content areas of just different strategies, and ATC teachers, two ATC teachers, to share some strategies that they're using to engage students, to stay connected, and maybe just some fresh strategies that other folks haven't thought about. We know that fatigue is going to fit in and be will as well, as districts let out at different times based on their 1,062 hour requirement. The other thing that's going to come up next around preparing for the fall is we have a webcast that's coming out on the next day, then on Thursday, and all these will be archived, so don't feel like you have to be there in real time. We understand your time is precious and your teachers are as well, but I hope you will help us get out. Is we're beginning a series, and they're short, about how to start preparing for the gap when students come in. So how do we start preparing, knowing that kids are going to be behind, are going to have all different experiences, and that we're not taken by surprise at the strategies we're going to have to use and the approaches that we take in our daily instruction to address those needs. It's going to be the majority, not the minority of our students. And so that starts on Thursday. I will make sure, Jenny, that you have those links so it's very easy to share with this advisory, and we highly suggest you help us promote it as well. We're trying to provide just-in-time support because we know this is setting in. We know these are your concerns. Other things that have come up, it says on the superintendent's call yesterday with the governor, it was alluded that maybe in the fall we would have to go, we would have to go to some type of alternative schedule, not all students every day. How much planning do we need to make for that now? How much time would we have if we think that it is the plan? That one I am not sure about. Kelly, can you or Kevin speak to that? It's a good question.
I think and Kelly, I'll let you come behind me. The governor, of course, we want to keep hoping for the best, but when you start looking at the documents from CDC that the White House is asking states to use, which is what we're using on the phases of reopening the country, and then before you even get to phase one, it's called a gating procedure. And so I kind of look at it like a horse race. In order to get to the first phase of the track, you've got to get in the starting gate, and we're just now in the starting gate. And before the gate can be released, we have to have, I think it's 14 days of a reduction in number of our confirmed cases. And there's some other metrics too, but that's the main one. And then you get to phase one, and phase one is still no schools are still closed in phase one. It's groups of 10 or less. And then when you get to phase two, it's I think you can have groups of up to 50, but then you have to have PPE, gloves and masks in large groups like that. Bars are still not open, but restaurants are, all of those. But when you start looking at if you start laying the gating, the phase one and phase two over our calendar, it's very possible we could get to the beginning of a school year and maybe just be in phase two. And so the governor, I think, wants us to think positively that we won't, but at the same time to try to be prepared. And nobody knows what that looks like. Nobody in the country really knows what that looks like. So just know that we're all struggling with that. We're going to be working all summer and to assist with guidance on if we start moving in that direction. I actually saw a superintendent in Kentucky today send us his draft plan on what something like that may look like, and he had the his days divided up into Group A and Group B, and Group A comes in on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Group B Tuesday, Thursday, and and it was for a plan that we would never think we would have to have, very well thought out. So we're already having folks thinking about that, and of course, as we start vetting a lot of those, we will publicize that and roll that out for all school districts to use the thinking that's going on so we can be prepared. I know that doesn't give you a lot of comfort and a lot of answers, but we do need to start thinking about it looking different, and it will look different even if you have the buses rolling up and the buildings are full to capacity. It will still be different just because of the fact that students had such a different end to this year. They're obviously going to be bringing you more issues and social, emotional, not to mention the learning issues. So it will be different even if we start in a normal way.
Kevin, the only thing I would add to that, where I was going to go, is just the planning piece. I do think it would be really smart to start having some conversations with your building level leadership teams about what that would have to look like if you had to have an A day or B day, or half the kids in the morning and the other half of the kids in the afternoon. And I would encourage you too to talk with other principals in your districts, in your district principal team meetings, about what that could possibly look like. I know we don't want to think about that, but I think we will be in a lot better shape if we kind of start to have those conversations now and think about the logistics of your building, the size of the staff, the space that you have for co-curricular classes and library and the cafeteria and gymnasiums and those type of things, what that might look like in your specific building, because it's going to have to be different with all schools rather than just one piece of guidance that everyone can follow. So I definitely think it would be smart to probably put some things on paper, thinking long term that it's not going to look the same as it always has.
Agree. I think also the next topic that was brought up was grading NTI assignments and impact of NTI instruction on calculating grades. Another great question. We did issue guidance on this as well of considerations. This is a local decision. Many districts defer it to SBDMs, others don't. If you have not seen that guidance specifically, I will send that link. But if you get on our COVID-19 KDE page, we have it broken down into educate, feed, and support. Under educate, it'll say teach and learn, and you will see that there is a specific link for grading, and it is just guiding questions to help you to consider, because there is a huge equity issue on the learning environment. What is it that you're actually measuring? What is your district asking you to do? Is there a district-wide policy? It really depends on where you are. We did have Becky Gilpatrick from KIA come and speak to superintendents about the impact on KEYS money. That's been a big concern for high school students, all high school students, not just for seniors. And so she did provide scenarios, which we have listed on there, and how KEYS calculates the GPA, whether it is 2 semesters of GPA, a semester and a quarter, whatever is numerically available is how they calculate KEYS. I know there was a lot of questions about pass-fail, the positive and negative impacts on that. So those are big decisions. They're ethical decisions for you, and so just really finding that balance and the guidance and consistency within your district is really, really important, because it is different, but it was probably the #1 issue a couple weeks ago nationwide. So we have included in the guidance 3 different articles for consideration and how different districts across the nation have addressed it. We also thank you, Jenny, very much for adding the link. And then the last thing that I'll say on this, just to look at some preliminary feedback from the survey, and if you haven't taken it, please, before you leave today, take it, because it really does help guide our work based on your feedback. Talking about communication with families, the specific example was families who do not know how to speak sign language, but their child is deaf, and the child thought they were being punished for being sent home. They didn't realize that school was closed. So that continuous communication with homes are absolutely essential at all levels. I've said to a group yesterday, my husband's a high school science teacher, and probably half of his time is planning and assisting students online, and the other half is literally calling 25 to 30 kids a day, just checking in with them if they haven't turned in work. Many of our high school students are working 40 hours a week because many of their family members have been laid off, and Kroger and Walmart need workers. So I know you all have very similar situations, especially for your older kids. There's a worry about child safety. We know that child abuse reporting of child abuse has dropped significantly because a big number of the reports and call-ins come from schools. And so that's a concern. And we also had talking about ending the school year and required contract days. And the last thing I want to bring up around that also is the support around online professional learning bulletin board, and that has over 70. I think it's like 77, but it could have increased by now. So I'll just say over 70 online professional learning opportunities for your teachers or you. There are ELA credit available for many of them, and you can see what audiences apply for the synchronous or the asynchronous trainings that are available. If all the times of your teachers saying they don't have time for something or that they would like to have some personalized professional learning, now is your opportunity. You might have some extra time, and especially with the planning that it is going to take to prepare for the fall, to mentally prepare, to prepare academically, to really know those standards and those progressions, which I mentioned that we'll start that support next week. It's just really an opportune time. And so I hope that you are thinking strategically about that. I know it's so hard. It's one more thing on your plate, but it is a great time. And normally we never have time in May to not think about what happens the next day or the field day or the awards ceremony or whatever it is. And you really have the opportunity to spend some time virtually with your staff and really give them some opportunities. So I'll make sure you have all that bundled together. Jenny, I'll send that to you and Stacy and Paul to make sure you have access to that. Kelly, do you have anything else you want to add? I feel like I've been a talking head. I apologize.
No, I think that covers it, but I really encourage everyone to take the survey or reach out to us via email with any questions or concerns that you all have moving forward.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you all so very much. I see that we're running very tight on time, but we do have one additional topic about delaying the Impact Kentucky survey results. And we have Associate Commissioner Rob Akers here with us. Rob, would you mind taking just a couple of minutes to talk about that as well?
Yeah, I'll see if I can do this in 30 seconds to keep us on our hard stop here. The short story, folks, is that we do have the results from Impact Kentucky. We had over 43,000 people take the test. We had a plan to roll the results out March 23rd, and then COVID-19 hit, and we just, as a leadership team, decided that we didn't want to burden districts with the results and have them just kind of go unnoticed and put on a shelf, because you have way too many more important things to be worrying about right now in terms of educating, feeding, and supporting, just like we're trying to do with you guys, except you all are actually on the front lines. So the question that is there now, and I'm sure we're fine to take those in text or on the Google Sheet or whatever means we're capturing information, is when's the right time to give them out? We talked to teachers. They of course would like to see the results sooner than later. Superintendents said not even until June. There are folks who would like to see it now and be able to use them to inform how they're going to use some of the remaining contract days with their staff for planning for next year. We have just really two options for releasing data. One is just opening it to the public. The other is that we can funnel them to the superintendents, which is what we told them we would do first. And then they would have a link to be able to forward your data to you, but it would basically only be in like PDF form until we go full bore with it, because for that to happen, we would have to have our vendor go back and create individual accounts for each building level administrator. And that's probably because we didn't foresee this. We already had them do that for superintendents, and that's probably not something we can get done in time this year for this administration. So happy to talk to you offline, get back to you with anything, but please share your input and your thoughts on that so that we can use that information to inform the decision of when we actually are able to release this information to you. And again, thank you for everything you all are doing with our kids. Really appreciate it. We're I know we're not with you physically, but we're with you in spirit, and wish you all the best. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you. So there was one question Brian Jacobs asked, could you send to principals so that we can at least see them now? So what is the projected time frame, are you thinking?
I think that, and I'll defer to Kevin a little bit on this, but I know he was thinking initially somewhere between mid-May and June, depending on what our feedback was. I think it just kind of hinges on being able to take this feedback, talk about it as a leadership team, and see what we can do to get it out to you. Any additional feedback you all can provide or extra guiding questions would be really helpful.
Yes,
Absolutely.
The decision's going to be made and when and how based on the feedback from the meeting we're in right now, and then also from the teacher advisory meeting that was, I guess that was yesterday. We also received feedback. So we're going to take that back to the leadership team and may need to readjust what we were thinking based on the feedback.
All right, thank you so much. So for the advisory council, are there other questions or additional feedback that you want to be able to provide at this time? Feel free to put it in the chat or to unmute your mic and ask your question if you have some additional feedback. Also, of course, you may email me and I will pass that information on to the associate commissioners to make sure that they have that information as well and that feedback. Okay. So just to save the date, our next meeting is July 22nd. Please watch for communication from me about that date, whether it will be online using this digital platform or if it will be face-to-face in Frankfurt. So that information will be forthcoming as we receive guidance ourselves on what the plans are for coming together virtually or in person on that day. And then also these dates have not been, right there. So these are proposed dates for our future meeting dates, our first, second, third, and fourth quarter meeting dates for next year. If you would just pencil those into your calendars, but they have not yet been confirmed. But just hold those dates, if you will. All right, so at this time, we need someone to please motion for adjournment, and we'll need a second, and then we will adjourn.
Jennifer Hutchison, motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do I have a second?
Toya Roby, second.
Thank you, Toya. And if there's no further questions, if there are further questions, please type those in the chat box. And Paul, if you would just go to the next slide for the thank you slide, and we'll call it a meeting. So thank you all so much for your participation. Thank you to the presenters who brought the information and gathered that feedback. We will be sending the copy of that feedback to you shortly after this meeting.
Thank you, everyone. I want to thank you. You're doing outstanding work in an unprecedented time, and it's not going unnoticed. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thanks, you too. Okay, let's see.
Jenny, you saw that some of the people did come online that weren't originally there, like Tamala Howard was on there.
Tamala, Robert King, Josh Blevins, and Michael Kelly.
Okay, yeah.
Now,
I can't see that, but I did notice, like, when I was, flipping back and forth that they were on.
Okay,
yeah,
yes.
I had it noted. I saw it too. So for the attendance, I'll just go by those who